Hey guys, how are you doing? My name is Clint Cooper and I'm from Validus. Thanks for joining today's session. I have three additional to me amazing presenters, and we're going to take you through how to audit effectively in a remote environment. So, just a few housekeeping rules before we get going. As you heard, everybody's on mute except for those presenting today. We'll open up the discussion at the end of the session for some Q&A, but feel free to submit some questions throughout the session through the chat button. Cool. This should take us in and around 45, 60 minutes. Appreciate everybody attending. Hopefully you get some value out of this. If we quickly just look up on the screen here, everyone can see that. So the presenters along with myself today. So my name again is Clint Cooper, the operations manager at Validus. Been with the team for about 4.5 years at Validus. Then we've got Lee Polson, and I'll let Lee introduce herself just real quick.
Hi, yes, I'm a technical accountant with Validus. I was an auditor at PwC in my former days, and now I help Validus with identifying best practices with the auditors' help and answering questions. So we're glad to answer those today.
Cool. And then I've got Matt Sutorius and Brad Caruso. You're going to hear from these guys in just a little bit. So we'll wait for them to introduce themselves just a little bit through our broadcast this morning. But really excited for them to be with us. So in terms of what we're going to go through, all of you know Validus, or maybe have heard of us if you're not using the tool today, as the providers of data share, right? Which is a tool it's a web-based tool that allows you to extract GL, AR, AP data out of your client's accounting package. And through that, I, on a consistent basis, along with Lee, we're working with, upwards of 50 of the top 200 accounting firms in North America. Right? So we get to spend a lot of time speaking to leaders of those businesses, which are all of you. This is really a leadership kind of based crowd we've got today. And given the recent changes to our world, it seems sensible to pull together the learnings that we've had from these various discussions across the last couple months. And so we can apply those to the future here and give some best practices and really share that with the audit community. So what we're going to do across these next 60 minutes, give or take, is talk about some of those best practices and share some of those real world experience regarding remote working and auditing, right? And I want this to be an interactive session, so please throughout this ask questions within the chat. We'll talk about those at the end, and if it's appropriate, we'll answer those as we go through, for sure. So in terms of our agenda, we've broken down audit effectively in a remote work environment into really 5 key areas. So I'm going to go through those. And that again is from discussions that we've had with all of you throughout the last couple months. Then we'll move into that panel discussion where Matt and Brad are going to kind of answer some questions for us about things that they're doing in their firms and what they're seeing in the industry. We'll talk a little bit about some tools to assist you with that, bring you up to speed and just kind of remind you a little bit about where data share can help. And then we'll do a little bit of recap and Q&A. That should bring us to about the hour, give or take. So excited to kind of run through it. Again, ask questions if you have them throughout here. So, and I'm going to be looking over this way a little bit as I've got this on my second screen. So apologies if I'm not looking at the group. But the 5 key areas that we've broken this down into, which both I'll speak to and my panelists, the panelists here, Brad and Matt, will speak to as well, are kind of as follows, right? So we've got what should we be doing in terms of tools, right? So how do you audit effectively in a remote environment? What kind of tools do you need to do that? Looking at balance, communication, team, and focus. So if I talk about those just quickly at a high level, so from a tools perspective, what kind of cloud-based tools are you acquiring? What kind of cloud-based tools are you using? Obviously, we lay that out into kind of needing some sort of data extraction tool, which DataShare does well, a a communication tool, which Microsoft Teams seems to be a choice amongst the audit world. A SureLink for managing your request list. So all those type of technologies, those allow your teams and your clients to really audit effectively in a remote environment. In terms of balance, really keeping in mind your client and staff, right? What are their working hours? Making sure work-life balance is pretty difficult nowadays, given all the different situations that people have to keep that balance straight, know what day of the week it is, what client you're working on, all of those things. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about there. In terms of communication, really emphasis on over communication, okay? Using video conference, much like myself and some of the presenters are doing today, really helps understanding people's facial cues, what's going on, and connect a little bit better. From a team perspective, ensuring that all your team members are engaged, right, both socially and work related, and rebalance those teams if you need to. Okay, putting strong communicators together with weaker communicators potentially. And then lastly, focus. So focusing and allowing your teams to focus, limiting on distractions, helping them with time and task management, especially for some of your newer staff, or maybe this is their first year staff or second year staff. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over tools, as we're going to come back to that, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about balance, communication, team, and focus, and then we'll get to the panelists. So from a balance perspective, the two key areas I wanted to focus on was meetings. So from what I've heard that's worked well is hold more regular meetings with your staff, right? Review their workload on a more frequent basis and talk to them about their progress on tasks and just their general well-being, in all honesty. And that really moves into that work-life balance. So, be comfortable with your staff needing to tend to family matters, during normal business hours, as long as they're getting their work done. Working hours, that may be different from employee to employee. And as well, something that's been brought up that people have been talking about is you should be encouraging some vacation days, especially as we've just come out of busy season, or a typical busy season. It might be extended a little bit this year, but encourage vacation days. As if some of you have a use it or lose it plan, there's going to be the back half of the year is going to be loaded with vacation, so you want to make sure that gets spread out just from a workload perspective. And the kind of main takeaways from all my conversations with clients on the balance area are those meetings and work-life balance. We're really thinking about, everyone has a different situation at home. Some people might have a home office, some people might not. Some people may have kids that they're taking care of. Some people might be taking care of a parent that maybe had to move in with them, maybe even a sick family member. Or some people might be living on their own, so a bit more in isolation. So everyone's got a different environment. So holding those more regular meetings are going to help you understand what's going on with that person, so that they are most effective at your firm. And the last takeaway from all of my discussions with people is work from home doesn't mean work all the time. So you need to ensure your employees are getting a break and that they can separate work and life. That's when people are going to be most effective. And talk to each employee about what that means for them and be comfortable with that schedule. All right. From a communication standpoint, over communicating to people, and what does that really mean? What have I heard people talking about there? So make sure you're calling, emailing, video conferencing with your clients and your staff. And I think the video conference piece is a big one, especially with your clients, if that's possible, to try to continue to build that relationship. Your business and your industry is a relationship-based industry. And right now, video conferences is really the only great way we have to do that. And that falls back on some of the tools we were talking about as well. And with that video conferencing, from what I've heard is, and even practiced myself, is this actually is a good time to capitalize on everyone working remotely. There isn't a good reason to not be video conferencing or having people turn on video conference. It's going to make sure that you're holding people accountable, that you can see that they're paying attention to what you're talking about, that they are attentive to the discussion. And again, it's easier to read how people are reacting to ensure that they're engaged, right? The other interesting thing is if you have various offices, right, and maybe there's specialists within each office, what I've heard some staff talking about, or sorry, some businesses and firms talking about is this is kind of maybe there were historical, a headquarters type of building, and then there were satellite offices, and maybe those satellite offices, may feel neglected or maybe not get their input. This is flattening the curve because everybody has to discuss in the same manner, and that manner being virtual. So that's helping break down some of those walls, and you can capitalize on that during this time for sure. If we then run through and thinking about the team, okay, so really this is about keeping a tight knit group, okay? So you've likely already done this, but this is just something to think about and something that we've been hearing is to review those team structures, right? And look to maybe rebalance. So I think I already talked about it, but ensuring that you have strong and weak communicators, both on the same team. Someone might have been a strong communicator in the office, but maybe you notice they're not as strong communicator over that video conference or virtual. So making sure that those teams are aligned appropriately. And then check-ins. So have structured check-ins for your staff and formalize that across the firm. That will help your kind of internally between partners and leaders be able to talk on equal grounds about your employees and how everything is going with them, and review their assigned timelines and ask them what assistance they need to complete things, right? And then in terms of focus, time management is key. I think the thing to think about when we're thinking about focus is people are used to working remotely, staff are used to working remotely, but not at their house. So that presents a lot of distractions potentially, and could create a lack of focus. Some of you may have more or had well-established work from home policies, but a lot of people would have been used to working in the office and working at a client site. So working at home is going to present a lot of distractions. So some time management, maybe a quick seminar or a training on time management basics would be something we would recommend, something we've been hearing other firms doing, and trying to limit those distractions. So if you're discussing with staff, what does their work setup look like? Encourage that they mimic their office working environment to as much as possible in terms of computer screens, extra screens, a comfortable chair, all of those things. Are they using Outlook, their Outlook calendar to manage their time, booking out windows of availability? All of those things will help them focus. Um, Many of you on this call have a lot of industry and professional experience. So when I talk about doing a webinar about or a seminar on time management, it isn't necessary that you need to hire an external party to do that. Those can just be lessons learned from the likes of yourselves or other leaders in your business to then present back to the team. I can think about personally some just real basic things that I got from when I was new into the professional world from some senior people that I still use today. Again, things like how to use my Outlook calendar appropriately, all of those things, some basic stuff that you can do without costing any extra money, just a bit of time from people. And building that environment from your side that limits the distractions is key and something I've heard over and over again. So thinking about, what can your firm do to ensure your staff have the right setup at home? And I think Matt is going to touch on one of those points as we come into this a little bit more. So those are the really key takeaways from those 4 areas that I've personally heard. But what I wanted to do now is actually move over and talk to our panelists that we brought on board and have them talk about some of the experience that they've had. So I'm going to do that. We're going to kick that off with Matt. It'll be a bit of a question and answer session between him and myself. And then if you guys have questions, if you want to pass those along, I'll make sure we get those asked. So Matt, can you hear us?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Clint?
Yeah, we got you. Perfect. So
Great.
Matt, why don't you give us, just a little bit of quick introduction to yourself, a little bit about your area of focus, your background, things like that.
Sure. I'm a partner at Clark Nuber, and I work on the commercial audit side of the practice. Most of my focus is on technology startup companies, but I've worked in pretty much every type of commercial company you can think of here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm also informally in charge of Clark Nuber's digital tools and audit efforts, things like data share, validate, Smartsheet, engagement, DocuSign, MindBridge. I'm a power user for those and have been experimenting with them for the past couple of years. I'm working from home here in Washington. I have 3 small children, and they recently figured out how to unlock the office door, so every conference call is a new adventure for me.
Gotcha. Well, perfect. Yeah, that gives us a bit of sense of background and it seems like it makes you well placed for the end of this discussion. So what are some of the things you know, that Clark Nuber maybe has done to assist the staff, in this time of largely remote working and having remote clients?
Sure. We went work from home pretty quickly here in Washington the first week of March. And the first thing we did was introduce a forgivable loan program to all our employees to get different technology for home use. So things like monitors, docks, headsets, cameras, all of that, up to $500. And it's forgiven over a year as long as they're still here at the company within a year. And that's been really popular. Pretty much everybody had a laptop, at least on the audit side of the house,
Uh-huh.
prior to this happening. But for those that didn't, we accelerated that process and wound up mailing about a dozen out to employees to their homes,
Oh, wow.
pre-set up by our IT department.
Yeah.
And then we've been doing a lot of webinars. Not just on accounting or working issues, but things like mental and physical well-being. We do a yoga thing once a week for half an hour for everybody. A couple of cooking
Cool.
classes have been interesting. So yeah, pretty much all sorts of random stuff just to keep people's minds doing something other than work occasionally.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Is staff enjoying that stuff?
Yeah, it seems to be really popular. I think our in-office yoga usually had about 10 people, and the remote one has more like 30. So it's been
Wow,
good.
great. Um, cool. And moving over just a bit to maybe your audit procedures and practice, how has the current environment kind of impacted some of your procedures?
Yeah, there are new issues we're facing now. Obviously, there's a heightened risk of fraud with internal control structures changing drastically with everybody working remotely. It's impossible to do site visits, inventory observations, or in-person inquiries that we used to do all the time. You can't really validate any hard copy documents anymore because we're not seeing them. And then it's been really difficult for a lot of my clients actually to get the audit requests we're asking for without going into the office. So some things we're doing, we've got a Zoom enterprise license now, and we're basically mandating that all of the fraud inquiries and those type of calls happen over video, so you can read people's facial expressions and have somewhat of a face-to-face. I'm
Yeah,
doing my first digital inventory observation in a couple of weeks, where as I understand it, the guy's going to walk around with a phone and show me things, and that'll be interesting and a learning experience. I don't know what that's going to be like.
We're all
We,
confused about what that's going to be like.
yeah, I know. I'm a little nervous. Thankfully, I don't have a lot of inventory clients, but I'm sure people on the call do. And we're full DocuSign now for basically anything a client would sign, engagement letters, representation letters. And we've shut down we had a little printing shop. Believe it or not, people do get print copies of financials occasionally, and that is on hiatus, hopefully forever, but at least
yeah,
temporarily.
got it. Um, cool. Seems like you've made some nice digital changes and been leveraging some tools and some of the stuff, yeah, that we'll touch on here in a little bit. And of course, we know each other because we've worked, I've helped you implement data share and you've been kind of a great sponsor of that. So how has data share, how has that been impactful kind of during these times, and how have your clients even found it? On both sides, how have the staff found it? How have your clients found it? Have you had any personal experiences?
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients, some of the different industries like manufacturing and real estate, where they've been hesitant to use new technologies because it's easy for us to just walk down the hallway and ask them questions. And this to some extent has forced the issue. So we've probably tripled our data share usage this year compared to last year, and found that
Yep.
having the ability to dig straight into the GL and consolidate some questions and then bring it up to a client in a Zoom call has made things really efficient. So we're using it a lot. Then the getting the validity of the trial balance has been great too. There are things we would do in the field, going and watch clients pull different reports up on their computers and export them to us, that you can't do anymore. But getting it directly from data share really alleviates a lot of those concerns and mitigates the risk somewhat. And then the clients like it too, because they see things fall off our PBC lists, our request lists. They don't really have time or the desire to get a bunch of stuff when they're not in the office, and this has made things quite a bit easier.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have to imagine that some of them maybe can't even get to their offices, especially as you guys were kind of, you were early. Seattle was early to the kind of locking everything down, so there might not have been a protocol set in place yet for what needed to happen. So I'm sure that was useful to them.
Yep, yeah, we all pretty much just ran out the door on a Friday and never came back.
Yep.
Um, and what's your plan moving forward with you said you were in charge of or informally in charge of kind of the digital tool set at Clark Nuber. What else is on the horizon for you guys?
I mean, there a lot of the things we're doing now, in response to the pandemic and working from home, are things that I've wanted to do for years. Moving
Sure.
to DocuSign for documents, and doing a more IT-based audit, where we're looking at populations of data in a program like DataShare, and validating things using programs like Validate, and less just sampling of individual balances and pulling invoices. So I want to keep the momentum going on that. There's really no reason we have to step back to look at paper documents anymore now that we're capable of doing audits this way.
Cool. Well, perfect. Thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate you being on with us today, and some good insight. Um, so let's move over to Brad. Brad, you want to introduce yourself quickly? Again, kind of area of focus, your background, things like that.
Sure. Thanks, Clint.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. And I agree wholeheartedly with, I think, all of Matt's sentiments. I think we experience a lot of the same thing, and I'm very happy with the way things go, because it does push the issue of being able to be a little bit more electronic. I work for a firm called Withum. We're about 1,200 people, now a national firm because we have an office. We merged with a firm in California, so now kind of have an East and West Coast presence up and down the East Coast as well. I work in our not-for-profit practice. I'm one of the team leaders with not-for-profit, and have been with Withum for about 14 years now. So been grinding and fighting the good fight for several years. My first audit I've ever been on, I use Red Ropes, and now I can say that everything I do is in a computer. So I will say that in my 14 years, we have wholeheartedly evolved, and I've been under our practice, technology guy, Jim Burke, who some of you may know. He guys all over the place, literally, not anymore, but for a while he literally was all over the place. So he kind of always embodied in advancing technology in the audit profession itself and the accounting profession. And so our firm has always been on that edge of technology. When Validus, first came out with DataShare about 4 or 5 years, not first when they came out with it, but coming into the U.S. market, we were one of the first firms to kind of work with them and help, figure out how we can adopt it. And I was involved in that. And I only remember that because I remember talking with Clint, and he has a young kid. I had a young kid who was born literally right when that was all going on. And so that was my kid's going to be 4 in 2 days. So that was about 4 years ago, which is pretty cool that we've been working with this for that long. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So Matt, I do understand the trials and tribulations of having 2 young kids working from home. It's great, and it's also very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, and how is Withum? How have you kind of made that remote working process work, for lack of better terms, for your internal teams, your internal staff, Brad?
Yeah, and I think one of the positive aspects, and I'm sure Matt's firm is in the same boat as us, is that we've been investing in making this happen for a long time. Many of our clients, I think, have never, especially in the not-for-profit world, there's a big stigma to change. And so a lot of them didn't invest in technology per se. They did, but not to the point of, hey, I can send all my employees home and just start working from home tomorrow. Whereas public accounting, I mean, we were the experts of working remotely. I mean, how many of us sat in an office of our own?
Right.
Never. We were always in someone else's office, and we always had to make that work. And the variable was always what form and content is our clients' information, data, and processes and everything in. And obviously, as I said, in the not-for-profit world, a lot of people were more paper oriented, less data oriented. And so for us, we've been investing in, and I think a couple of things that really put us over the edge to allow it to happen immediately. Like literally, we started just working remotely, as Matt said. I think I left on a Thursday, so I beat you by one day. But and on my way home, I stopped at Home Depot and bought my doomsday freezer, so I was good to go for a little while. But I get home, we start working, and it just happened to work out. And what's crazy is we invested in all these tools. One of them was obviously, as Clint said, the Office 365, and just adopting a lot of those tools that were built into 365, and a lot of the Microsoft tools like Teams. Like we've been using Teams for about 2 years now, and I can tell you the first day I used Teams, I hated it. The second day I used Teams, I liked it, and ever since, all I do, and every one of my team members will tell you, I push all communication for projects through Microsoft Teams, and that's both on our niche practice area level. So I make sure that we do that on the practice area level, so that we don't lose track of our communications. And on the individual job levels, we actually have like client channels set up for every client we work on, so that we centralize the communication and it's not all sitting in emails. And then at that point,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, then at that point, the only thing we got to worry about is data retention policies and all that, which I can tell you in the electronic world is becoming more of a challenge than in the paper world. Paper world, you just take a bunch of stuff and throw it into a shredder. Right now, it's you can't really do that. You gotta be very mindful of all the places you have client data, and I think that's one of the challenges. But the last thing we did is we implemented a tool called Microsoft or Withum Experience, which is basically a portal for our clients. So our information request lists don't sit on an Excel file anymore. They actually sit on a portal or on an interactive database, so that they have a login to it. And we utilize Box for secure file transfer, and that sits behind it. So I think having that tool plus Microsoft Teams with the video capabilities, as Matt said, one of the challenges of moving an audit is really getting involved with the clients face to face. And the only way to do it is with video calls like this. Like, Matt's 3,000 miles away from me right now, and he's reacting real time to what I'm saying. This all wouldn't be possible without technology like this.
Sure.
And lastly, using tools like data share and just getting the data and doing the uploads. Clients, I wholeheartedly agree, are much more willing to utilize all these different tools. And I think the biggest challenge is that we all have many different tools, and it's how do you aggregate them so that your clients aren't overloaded with all these different platforms. So the more that you can centralize those, the easier it becomes.
Gotcha. And you mentioned a challenge there of obviously data retention. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you guys have had at Withum?
I would say it's definitely in managing people. I think managing people from the start is the hardest thing to do. It's not that it's a problem, nor is it something that I think is a negative. It's just getting used to it. And I think the challenge is just not overexerting people. When you're face to face with people, you can tell that people are stressed out. You can tell that people can handle it or not. When you're video and your email and your Skype and Teams and all these apps, we think we can just schedule 13 video calls in a row. And by the third one, your mouth feels like a desert, and you actually you're shaking because you're like, oh my God, I have 10 more to go. And so I think just, one of the things we're learning in this remote environment is you have to be efficient with what you do, but you also have to not be too efficient to the point where people burn out from it. And as you said, all three of the people on this panel have young kids, and we know that when you have video call after call after call after thing, like you start getting very anxious, and it's like, oh, I got to stop right now, but everything around me is not stopping because it's just in a computer, and people can't see that what you're going through. I think that's the biggest challenge, as much as that's
that comes back to that balance piece, right, that we were talking about there.
It's 100%
situation's
balance.
a little bit different, and it's just ensuring if you have those regular touch bases with people, you'll know kind of, okay, are they getting their workload done? What is their workload? And again, maybe their hours have to be a little bit different. I know personally for myself, I find myself doing a little bit more work in the morning and maybe later at evening. So I got to take some breaks throughout the day. As Brad alluded to, I have some small children as well, so they need tending to. Perfect. And then lastly, Brad, just in terms of all of those things you've been doing and the kind of tools you were talking about there, where does data share fall into that toolbox of software that you guys see, and how do you see that evolving in a heavier remote working environment?
Yeah, great question. Before I go on to that, the other last challenge I think everyone can relate to, and if you can find a solution, just email it to me, is how do your clients manage their passwords? Because we have a lot of like electronic tools, and I swear I have clients calling me all the time, I can't get into Box now. I'm like, I can't help you with that. It's like, you forgot your password. That's not something I can tell you how to click the button, but that's it. Where data share fits is in a good place, and we're trying to get it to a better place for the following reason. So like I said, we have several different technologies, and we're trying to kind of mince them together so that our clients see one thing. And I think that's been part of the challenge, and one of the areas that we're working on. But data share fits in a very good spot because now with clients being more willing to provide data electronically and more willing to, they're used to working with us electronically now, through like I said, we have our couple portals, our secure file exchanges. I think just that comfortability with them is what's allowing it to work. And we obviously utilize data share as much as we can. As you're rolling out more connectors, more packages that help, that's obviously increasing. In the not-for-profit world, we have a few different tools that you've rolled out that have helped kind of increase that. And it's another tool in the toolkit. It's another software program or program that cloud-based tool that really allows us to get data and look at it in a consistent format. And really the part that helps us the most is we have a central analytics department. So kind of set up a separate department, which is kind of what Matt's doing. We have a department that does that. That's not necessarily a client-facing department. And that department kind of can now work with all this data, develop better, IDA, ACL, and other software program scripts. And that allows us to process the data better. And so getting it in a consistent format, I think, has always been a huge sell for us and a huge area that has helped us become a lot more efficient, because it's not us trying to figure out what field we need. It's already there. And then this way, all of our non-standard journal entry testing programs that we run, all of our matches that we run, we're able to actually use a consistent data set. So I think, obviously for every aspect of the audit engagement, we're using it where data comes out of a general ledger package.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's we look forward to continue to push that with you guys, and I'm glad to hear it's been working. And thanks for all that input and feedback there. We'll see if we can get the password one solved if anyone's got an idea out there. Perfect. Well, these guys are going to hang around with us for a little bit of Q&A. As we're just going to run through a few more things, give everyone a reminder on where data share does fit into this. Lee is going to show us a few things. First, I'm going to just touch on a number of the things the guys said here with just the tools. So that was, as you remember, number 1 for our tools, our kind of 5 key areas, I should say. So what you're looking for, and our recommendation is that what you want is web-based software where you can easily share and communicate with staff and clients, okay? So of course, we would say that you need a data extraction solution. And of course, we believe that should be data share, which is gonna, if anyone's new here and is not using the tool, easily allows you to grab your client's accountancy data. It allows them to do that remotely with just a few clicks of a button, helps you eliminate the back and forth because you're grabbing all that data out of the AR, AP, and GO, right? Next, you need something for team communication. You might have one of these, you might have a couple of them. I would recommend consolidating down to one thing as to eliminate confusion. There are plenty of great options out there. You heard Brad talk about Teams, you heard Matt talk about Zoom. Slack is another option that's out there, but you need something that you can use to video conference, you can host virtual meetings, you need something that's easy to use, slick. You can screen share with clients to see what they're doing if they need help. And at times like this, it helps build relationships, not only with your clients, but with your staff as well. And lastly, if these are the 3 buckets of things, again, you must have data extraction, team communication, and some sort of file sharing thing to help you with your PBCs, whether that's something like SureLink or Dropbox. I'm sure there are others out there as well. It's going to help you keep track of your PBC items. It's going to help you upload additional documents and share that progress across the team. So those are the 3 things that we would suggest you really look into, and I would emphasize making sure those are all web-based applications, which most are today anyway, but regardless of the size of organization you are, I would push it being a web-based application, because those things are all going to help you with sharing, make sure you got complete and accurate data, and engage both your staff and your clients. All right, so if we talk a little bit about, shift gears just a little bit and talk about where does data share, so the solution we provide, how does that help with your remote audit? Three areas. It's robust, it's collaborative, and it's accessible. So the tool helps you capture, just as a reminder, all the full GL, AR, and AP. It's going to eliminate 30 to 60% of your standard PBC items, and we pull data for multiple years, not just the current one. So you don't have to go back and forth with your client for more information. It's collaborative because it's going to give the appropriate access and set the right alerts for all the team members involved in your audit. You don't need to be on any sort of VPN connection or internal network to do it, and you don't have to worry about any file sharing type rights. It's accessible because both your staff and your client can access it remotely as long as they can get to the internet, so they don't have to be in the office to do it. Now, if we talk about some of the historical really key areas and key reports and things that DataShare can help with, you're going to get a full journal entries report, which is a complete dump of the GL. You are going to be able to get a detailed income and balance sheet, which you can drill right into. You compare year over year periods. You can see fluctuations. You're going to get an AR and AP aging and movements type reports. You're going to be able to pull those for subsequent periods as well. You're going to be able to easily search for unrecorded liability. So all of those things you've always been able to do, you can do that across all our supported accounting packages with one click of a button, and all these things can be exported to Excel. Where I wanted to focus a little bit of our time today, however, and for Lee to show you what those look like, is let's talk a little bit about what we've been hearing from people on how the current environment with COVID-19 is impacting auditing. And all of these things you could always do in DataShare, but maybe there's a little bit more emphasis on them now. And just to remind you of where those things live. So you're going to be looking across, again, you can easily pull subsequent event information since you're pulling data up to the point in time your client uploads it. You're going to understand the bank balances because we have insight into that based on what they're inputting into their accountancy package. You're going to be able to look at collection times, comparing AR year over year. You're going to be able to see who is there, kind of that concentration. Can that biggest outstanding AR, can they pay their bills? Are they in an industry that's in trouble? Create some trends out of that, look at revenue, and of course, going concern, which is, I'm sure, something that's on everybody's mind that you're probably already looking into today for your clients. So with that, I'm going to pass presenter over to Lee, and Lee is going to take us through this really quick. And as a reminder, Lee is our in-house technical accountant, so really understands the product as well as anybody out there. And Lee, we can see your screen.
Great. So this is my portal, and I just wanted to take us through some of those things that Clint was talking about. Something that we have added to the portal since COVID started was at the bottom where we've added insolvency and cash flow availability. So you notice we have the Altman Z-score, and we've formatted that to private companies. But those of you who aren't familiar with Altman Z, it's a bankruptcy score. It basically looks at several like profitability, leverage, liquidity, solvency, and it calculates, what's the likelihood that that company will go bankrupt. If it's close to a 3, they're doing really well, and if it's close to a 1.5, 1.8, they're not looking so hot. So we've tanked our demo data to make it look like they're not doing so hot. We've also added this cash flow availability, which is just, what type of cash they have available for debt servicing. So something that Clint just said about how, when you bring data over for data share, it's always going to bring data as of whatever mirrors your client. So remember that built into all of billing is that you have multiple uploads. So don't ever hesitate to have your client do another upload so you could see, how are AR collections looking? How is liquidity going for them? Because in this time you want the most current information. So let's look at a couple of things that we talked about, and I'm going to see if I can make this a little smaller so I can see my screen. Okay, there we go. We want to be able to look at, say, the income statement and be able to pull up different time frames, because it's always going to give us, 2 full years when we pull up that income statement. But maybe now we want to look at what did the 3 or 4 months in 2020 look like compared to 2019. So remember, you can go in there, choose period, say I want to look at whatever data they have in their system. It'll bring up 2020 for you, and then also you can go in there and don't forget you can pull up 2019 because we keep all of that prior data as well. So just go in here, pull up those months. I want to see those 3 months, and now I have the ability to see what did March 2020 look like compared to March 2019. And remember, all of these are still, you're able to click on these to get a detail. So if you're seeing things that are, say, negative or just trends are going down, if you click on any of these buttons, you're able to get in there and see a detail of that activity. Another thing we have built in that I don't know is always used is our bank graph. And what's nice about this is it allows you to see what the bank balance was for each period. And again, because we've pulled that data up until the date of the upload, you can see how it's doing subsequent to year end. Again, any of these, if you click on them, and you'll notice, even if they're going to the negative balance, it'll show you that. But if you click on that, it'll give you a detail of those transactions. So keep in mind that you've got a view of, are they making transfers, or, what are they doing with their cash? Our aging schedule is always available, right? So this is good, and it's able to update how the aging AR report is going. Again, I have this updated through March 31st of 2020, so it's the most current data that we have. And then don't forget that we always have our built-in liquidation score. So how was accounts receivables looking as of year end? So we'll change this back to where it's 2019. And then we'll see, how our collections on AR looking as of the date of upload. So to do that, you can either go into receivable movements or the receivable ledger control. And if you click on totals, it's going to show you what the AR balance was at the close of year end on that closing balance. And then it'll show you in this outstanding column how much of that has not yet been collected. So it just gives you an idea, right, of how fast they're able to liquidate those accounts receivables. And then you can always scroll through this to see what's still outstanding as of the date of upload. Now, don't forget that our work papers, you can always change those to be subsequent to year end as well. So if I go to my reporting packs, generate work papers, I can choose to do it for the date that I'm doing the review, or I can do it as of year end. But when you get in there and you choose accounts receivable, now we can look at that aging and see how is aging for the time frame I selected compared to aging last year. So again, it's just different ways that we can look at trends to see how the COVID impact has been, and to see if there's any type of issues with liquidity or solvency or going concern.
And just a reminder to what Lee said there, right? Just because you had your customer upload in January, right? There's nothing stopping you from having them upload again in now, or if you happen to still be working on that, or a couple months after, if you're still working on that audit, to get the most up-to-date data.
Exactly, yeah. Don't forget too that we have the top 20 concentration. So if you're worried about different customers, whether you've heard things about them going bankrupt or them being able to have solvency problems, you can always see if it's going to impact your client as well.
Right, and here this is Nordstrom, so we might be worried.
Don't forget too that we have that PP&E roll forward in our work papers. So to see if they're selling off some of their fixed assets, if they're having cash issues, you can always go into our property report and it's going to give you a detail of the roll forward of those fixed assets. And if you click on fixed asset movements, it'll give you a detail of what kind of activity they're doing to see if they're selling or if they're still depreciating and doing all those things. We also have getting data. Let's go back into the portal. So don't forget that we have our interactive income statement balance sheet, but also the cash flow statement is also there available for you that you can change at any time. So that's one of the greatest things. I know we've said it many, many times, but because we're able to pull up all the subsequent activities for the as of date, don't forget to utilize it in those different areas so you could see just the health of the company overall.
Perfect. That was great, Lee. Thanks for running through that. Hopefully that gave everyone a little bit of just a reminder. Again, wasn't looking to be a training, just a refresher, a reminder in some of the areas maybe you hadn't thought about. So let me share my screen here, make sure I'm on the right screen. Let's see here. And there we go. Okay, so before we get into some quick questions, just to recap as to what we're speaking about today. Those 5 key areas really being around tools, balance, communication, team, and focus. Now they all kind of interconnect with each other. When we're talking about tools, really those web-based tools that help you and your clients share information. You got your balance, thinking about your staff and clients' work-life balance, trying to hold extra meetings, just over communicating, which leads into the next one. Making sure you're discussing objectives and timelines using video conference wherever possible and all the time. From your team's perspective, making sure that they're engaged, both from a work perspective and socially. Matt talked about some of the social things they've done there. We personally at Validus even have, we have a little team's month-end party that we like to say. So we share some fun facts with each other. It usually goes on for half hour, so it's a lot of fun. I've learned a lot about my colleagues, which I thought I knew well. And then focus, right? Just giving your, making sure that your staff are on focus, helping them with client tasks, conducting a short seminar, talking about time and task management are all good things to do there. Now, if we just open this up to Q&A, there were a few questions that came across, so I'll start with those. So let me see here. The first one was directed at Matt. Do you, and maybe there's a hidden agendas here, I'm not sure, maybe there's some other Clark Nuber people on, but do you ever envision Clark Nuber going back to the office?
Oh, well, I hope so. At some point in the future, that would be great. In all seriousness, though, as we've thought about this, there is a plan to bring back smaller amounts of people. HR has been working extensively on how that's going to work, and if you'll have to sign in different desks. We have a lot of benching areas, which seems like a bad idea. Just throwing 30 auditors into a room the size of this office.
Sure.
So yeah, we're working on that. I would like to see my office again at some point this summer. I'm counting on late June, early July, just for fun.
Yeah.
See if my plants are still alive.
And then Brad, on your side with being a little bit larger of a firm, how do you guys see handling that with a business over 1,000 employees?
Reopening, we just talked about it a lot. I foresee us going back to our firm kind of wrote a I'll call it a technical memo to the world and to our people that talked about how we're going to handle that, and I can tell you that it's going to be completely, totally, and utterly different. So if yesterday our capacity for our office was 140 people, I can tell you that tomorrow our capacity in our office is probably going to be a lot less. So maybe 60 people can be allowed in at any given time. So they've actually started assigning people like days and times, and it's going to be a completely different animal. I can tell you that they're very comfortable with us working remotely if we can handle that working remotely. And I think some roles within the company, it's easier to work remotely. So like me as an auditor, I was probably in my office 5% of the time, just how it was. So like me not, the only thing that's impacting me right now is my clients not opening. But I don't see the world going, and maybe this is a doomsday thinker thought, but don't think that I'm a doomsday thinker. But I don't see us going back to a normal work environment in an office for a long period of time. Plus, I think we're all realizing that we can do this, and to some degree does create a better work-life balance. And so that may be an incentive for us to move forward and not be as office focused and be more virtual with what we do. So I foresee things permanently changing to a degree, but also, when we do go back, I think it's just going to be different. It's not going to be the exact same.
Sure. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I would
agree.
go
Clint,
for
if
it,
you
Matt.
don't mind, one more thing. One thing we did do, we surveyed all the employees and said if the governor were to lift the stay-at-home order tomorrow, how many of you would want to come back to the office? And a pretty high percentage
That's a
said,
great idea.
I am staying away for months, no matter what happens. So the
Yeah.
general vibe of our employee base is that we can work from home effectively. It's risky to come in. We just don't want to. And here, a lot of the partners were thinking, let's get it open as quickly as possible. People want to come back. As it turns out, they probably don't in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes
Now,
makes
if
a
you
lot of
asked
sense.
that same question and said, "Hey, Brad, if daycare opened tomorrow, what would you do?" I would drop my kids off at daycare tomorrow.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo the same over here in terms of community. Like, we're a software, small, kind of agile business, but at the same time, we were largely office based, and we've had the same sentiment. Again, we can do it a little bit easier than a 1,000-person company or even a couple 100-person company, and ask that question about what do people want to do. But yeah, we've been very comfortable working from home, and I envision that we actually, likely look at potentially, different type working environment, and spending more money on social type events, things like that. So that's interesting. And another question that came up was, people were interested in your takes on the industries that you audit, given, Brad, you look at nonprofits, I believe, and Matt, you look at technology companies. Uh, how has working with your clients been? Matt, have you had a lot of trouble, given that you worked with technology companies? We would expect them to be well versed in remote working.
Yeah, for the most part, they haven't had the hardest time switching to remote working. The difficulty there has been that a lot of those industries they work in or the customers they serve have been completely disrupted by this. I have a client that they have an online software system that runs conferences, in-person conferences across the country. Their revenue went to zero in a week. So the audit then became more of a luxury that maybe was no longer necessary. So a lot of that has changed. The funding markets are all crazy, at least in Seattle. A lot of companies are doing really well. Buying Zoom stock 3 months ago would have been a great idea for everyone on this call.
Sure.
Versus, some of the companies that serve the more affected industries are really struggling. So it's really a little bit of both, a little good and a little bad.
Brad, how's your clientele been faced or been coping with this?
It's interesting because I have a lot of clients that do in the not-for-profit world that are like quasi healthcare or they're healthcare related. So like they provide personal care to individuals with disabilities or personal care to elderly. And I think that their industries are just very, very significantly hindered by their own staffing. So with the CARES Act that came out, I think offering people an unemployment benefit that's more than you're getting paid to go risk your life
Right.
to serve a client has significantly impacted their own ability to staff and perform the work. But that being said, I think many of them are adapting and overcoming, and they've had to give employees raises, they've had to counteract that. But I can tell you, for the most part, it's funny, but our communication like increases when we're remote as opposed to when we're in person. So like we were in person and some of our client would call me and they'd be like, your staff hasn't even come to talk to me once this week because they're sitting there emailing them. And I'm like, and now they're like, man, you guys are on top of this. We're having video calls every day. I'm like on every call because I can be, because I don't have to drive somewhere. So like the partner can be more actively engaged with the day-to-day like conversations with the client and stuff. I can hear the same things. And I could tell you that it has actually gotten easier and better for us. The challenge, however, the real last challenge is that we're getting audits 80% done. And it's like, hey, we'll get that done, but we have to go to our office to do that. And by the way, I can't go to my office, you know, and that's the bear of it. It's 80% is great, 20% we're like, we gotta figure out how to finish this work. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. Got it. Any other questions from the group? Free to post them in the chat. No, good.
And contributions are affected. I forgot to say that, but you think charitable contributions is going to be the biggest challenge. So anyway,
Yeah,
I digress. Continue.
No, I appreciate everyone's insight today. Thank you for the questions. Thanks, Matt and Brad, for the conversation. Hope everybody found that informative. Just, you know, adding some value back to the community, giving you guys some ideas to move forward with. We will post this out so people can watch it. I know if there are others in your firms that wanted to watch it, and also I know I had some people email me that were unable to make it. So I appreciate everybody's time. Lee, thanks so much for taking us through the data share piece. And I look forward to continuing to work with everybody that's out there on the call. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Clint.
Take care.
Thanks, Matt. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Clint.
See ya.
Yep. Thanks, Brad.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lee. Good hearing from you. Bye-bye.